Hey, kings and queens, thank you so much for tuning into Reflectionz TV once again. Today we're doing our Black History in the Making series with just an awesome and dope individual, Mr. Michael Partis. Make sure you stay tuned after the intro. You definitely don't want to miss this interview.
What am I talking about? Everybody know what the song's about. See, they be trying to hide the history, but they know who we are. Do you want to see everybody rise to the next degree? Well, raise your hand high if you agree. Just say yes, sir.
But first of all, Michael, thank you so much for agreeing to do this interview. It really means a lot to me and my viewers to let them know just who you are and what you're about. So I want you to tell me a little bit about the nonprofit that you have co-founded, the Young Movement Inc. and the Bronx Brotherhood Project. Tell me about those.
So Young Movement Inc. is a nonprofit around socioeconomic development. So we focus on two things, right? The first is increasing entrepreneurship in low-income communities, but particularly around high concentrations of Black, Latino folks. This is around the second issue, which is raising capital, right? One of the ways of raising capital is to increase wealth. And we're creating pathways to wealth, not just employment, which is important, not just job readiness, which is also important. We're really thinking about changing the economic portfolio and economic context of these communities. And we feel that a pathway to capital accumulation, which is by wealth, which really starts with owning your own business, right? Setting your own wages. One of the things that we talk about is if you're waiting for Starbucks or McDonald's or some other service industry to pay you what you feel you deserve, you're going to be waiting quite a long time. And you'll be waiting even longer for them to pay you what you need in order to make it in a place like New York City, right? Or any of these other metropolitan areas. So this is really what we focus on. But tied to that, we also do things around education because we feel community education is important for changing the socioeconomic conditions of our folks. So this includes, financial literacy. This includes ways to improve your credit, right? This is really about, and also college readiness is a key pathway, right? To having a higher degree, and then by utilizing this degree to help folks, improve their situations, particularly into the professional areas. So these are the things that we work on, thinking about economics in a much broader way: cooperation, wealth accumulation, and really the skills that a community can use. The Bronx Brotherhood Project is specifically focused on college readiness for Black and Latino males, high school age. So we have a two-part program. One is kind of readiness generally, which is, filling out a FAFSA. What does a syllabus look like the first day you show up, right? Well, the registrar's office, what is that? Who is that? What do they do? Really helping people not be lost when they get there. And it's a longer process to get people ready. So we do that part. The other part we do is just peer mentorship, right? So we have adult males, right, who mentor these young men. And we meet bi-weekly, and we just talk about issues that men of African descent are facing around masculinity, around criminal justice, right? And particularly not just criminal justice, right, but police brutality. Nutrition, right? Keeping ourselves healthy. We just lost Brother Sean Price, right? We don't know if it was a health-related issue or not, but too many brothers are dying too young, period. So just a broader way of things that we work with the Black and Latino young men on, and that's a more straightforward program, but we see it as a pipeline into the later kind of things that Young Movement does. So those are the two things I've been focusing on over the past 4 or 5 years.
That's really amazing. What's the age group of the young men that are involved in this program, and how can they become involved if anyone is interested?
So we take young men from as young as 14 to as old as we've even started freshmen and sophomores in college, 18, 19 years old. If you want to get involved, you can just contact me, Michael, Michael, at youngmovement.org. Again, that's Michael, Michael, at youngmovement.org. And I can get you some more information. You also could give me a call at 347-685-9776.
And where did this strong passion to help the community come from? Was it from what you saw growing up, or what you've seen other people go through, or just something that you said, I want to make a change?
Wow. Well, I guess I've always been orientated towards justice, right? And I see these things as justice orientated, right? And justice is because of the issues of inequality. And at a young age, I saw how inequality manifests itself in all ways, whether it's gender, right? Whether it's race, which is something I lived through, which is the undaunting burden that Blackness holds, right? In terms of being the least desirable by some parts of society and the most marginalized. I just had a lens for that, right? I think I had a family that had a deep Black consciousness, that definitely helped. And I didn't, it's interesting, my grandmother and my mother who really raised me, they never pressured me to be this particular type of professional. 'Cause, sometimes you grow up in a strong Black family or a Caribbean family, and it's like doctor, lawyer, nurse, social worker, like it got to be a particular kind of thing. But I never faced that pressure. My mama and my grandmama was always like, look, we came here for you to do what's in your heart, right? And whatever that may be, just do the best you can at it, be successful, and take care of yourself, but it's going to be okay. So I think that allowed me to have a wide range of kind of things I'm interested in and really like pursue things that were intellectually pertinent. And here I am.
Nice, nice. So what's the track that you took to get to where you are right now, from, I guess, high school to college to the career that you're doing now?
Well, what I couldn't control, which I thank family for, was early literacy. From about 3 years old, I was already reading, right? And I think that was important because my grandmother has like an 8th grade education, right? My mama graduated high school, but we didn't get advanced education, but reading is fundamental in not a, colloquial kind of way. My grandma read the newspaper every day of her adult life, every day. Even when she was on unemployment, she still put that 50 cents, 70 cents, 5 cents aside to read the newspaper every day. So I just kind of picked up that. And literacy to me was very important because no matter what happened in my life, family issues that we were going through, kind of personal, young male issues around opposition, resistance, like independence, pseudo-independence, because, you're not independent like that. All of those things, no matter what happened in school, I could read. And, school is key. From 3rd grade on, you read to learn. That absolutely, if I didn't learn to read at a very early age and then knew how to get information by reading, I probably wouldn't have made it. If I was relying on the system to, bring me back, I'm unsure how it would have went. So that curiosity, or rather the skill set to be able to read, was fundamental and is non-negotiable. That's what got me here. And other than that, I think also learned behavior, a family that works hard, that did it for me. And I think those are the 2 pathways that really got me to here now.
Nice. And you did talk about just having a lot of pride in yourself and just love for yourself, for your people, that your family instilled that in you. What do you feel is lacking in our, I guess, institutionalized education system for our young Black men and women, that they're not getting that true love and appreciation for themselves, that we would need programs such as what you do?
Oh, first, knowledge of self, right? And not to be whatever, but knowledge of self is key, right? Because one of the ways that I see the young Black and Latino men and women is if you are in the United States from an early age and for a long time, my analogy is it's literally like they're just pouring cold water on you every day, right? And in the summertime, sometimes like, oh, this is motivation to get up, get out, and get something, right? Like, I'm not going to let this deter me. Can't nobody hold me down. There's a whole bunch of rap songs that could probably fit in to okay, I'm not going to let this be a barrier. I'm going to jump over this. But in those winter months, and the majority, you in some place like New York, you can't be having cold water poured on you all the time. You get pneumonia, you get sick, you get, and that's what it is. You start to be like, I don't want to get from anywhere because I'm just seeking shelter. And that's what these systems do with the constant kind of ideas that, you can't make it. You're better off doing some other career that's different than what you maybe have your aspirations for. The doorways are very narrow to the kind of careers we think you can be. The whole cultural context is like having them have cold water on them all the time. And then they don't have knowledge of self in 2 ways. They don't have knowledge of self in terms of knowing more about the Pan-African diaspora background and community that they more than likely live in 2015, right? We don't have no homogeneous Black communities. The Black identity is very heterogeneous, right? By ethnicity, nation, state, whatever. They're not learning that. And then they don't get to interrogate themselves and learn things about themselves because they have that cold water poured on them all the time. So me, what I mentioned before, what I referenced, my family saying, look, do what you got to do you, make your mark in this world and do it, gave me a lot of time to look in myself and think in myself and explore different things. And then second of all, we have kind of strong family learning. Black things on TV, we're watching it. I mean, it's a different context because now black things on TV could be, who knows, right? But black things on TV, on PBS, we're watching it. Little special, somebody getting interviewed, we're watching it, right? Like, this is a thing that we're going to do. Even like the OJ trial, right? We first got cable, we watched court TV, and I learned about criminal justice system very quickly, about handling evidence, right? Not just the burden of guilt that one may hold. So anyway, long story short, knowledge itself is the key thing in terms of for themselves, but also the context that they're surrounded and embedded in. And we got to fix that, period.
We definitely do. And just talking about now leaders, because I think that you're definitely a leader in our community.
Humble.
And I'm definitely rocking, my black, red, and green today because it's Marcus Garvey's birthday. So rest in peace to the king. And we actually just lost Julian Bond, who was an amazing activist, just a freedom fighter, someone who really stood up for people of color. So with those people passing and with their memories living on, I want to ask you, what do you consider a leader today?
Participation, right? You got to get up, get involved, right? And there's a kind of lack of identification with the need to be participatory, right? So getting up and getting involved. And we could talk about the ways to do that, but I just don't see enough of that, particularly in our low-income communities, right? With kind of middle-class blacks and middle-class aspirations, there's this idea of service. You got to give back. You got to do this. You got to do that. But in our communities around the things that can empower and the things that could build, participation can be difficult. Some of it is because we're overworked, overstressed, and that's a reality of the thing. But another part of it is this deep individualism that's kind of sinking in, right? This deep individualism that a certain type of liberalism creates. I'm about myself. I'm going to do me. I can't be worried about these other people. As if that's not going to be, those people you're not worried about, if they fall on hard times, could be, the person in your community that, maybe you're like, oh, I got to watch out for this. I got to watch out for that. But you ain't been taking care of each other. You ain't been taking care of that person. So you don't have any connection with them. And then that leads to the more macro social issues. We got to learn to take care of each other. All of that starts with participation. Second thing is building a model for cooperation, which is an old fundamental of African descendant folks in our communities, that we need cooperation, working together in hard times, in good times. In order to be cooperative, we have to be participatory. And there's no mutual exclusiveness to the thing. They have to be together. Good leaders do this, right? From Dream Defenders to HBCUs, for whatever it is, those things do that. How do we create those models and bring them together? It's always been a challenge. Julian Bond, right? That was the SNCC challenge, right? And it's still the challenge, but we just got to press on. We don't have the luxury to say whatever, right? That's the opposite of the spirit. The leaders say, no, we're going to press on. It's hard.
It is really hard. And I think another big issue is, like you said, the lack of community and saying that we all have to have our hand in this. I feel that today people are just looking for the next Malcolm X or looking to the Angela Davises, saying we need that. Someone needs to rise up and do that. But we can't just all sit around and wait. So where do you feel that we lost that sense of we all need to have a hand in this instead of just depending on one person to take us to the mountaintop, basically?
I really think post-1975 is an interesting period. Because really what happens from 1975 to 1990, you see the mass incarceration system kick up and you see policing take a very particular context. What the particular type of policing does is it fundamentally creates distrust, right? It does in a certain way, RICO laws and getting crime off the streets and helping people. Yeah, there's that too. But there's the breaking of the social network and the things that link us because it creates distrust. And it also created degradation, right? We don't have, at those periods, a much broader conversation about why some brothers and sisters are involved in the things they're involved in, whether it's addiction, a main one, or these criminalized activities. Not talking about how poverty, the loss of jobs, the industrialization, how that's creating it, and also how the stress, right, of people coming back from Vietnam, people seeing their brothers, their sisters, their aunt, their cousin, their mother, their pastor, right, for a victim to stress and to addiction. We're not talking about that. And that led to the stigmatization of undesirable people who cares if they just leaning over and just hung and just strung out, right? The older ethic of whether it's the church-based community, the Panthers, the Young Lords, they were like, no. These things are the fundamental issue, actually. We need to go and have a rehab center and do outreach and whatever. We lost that, right? So the degradation really said there's undesirable but unnecessary people. To hell with them, part of my language. The second thing that happens then is along with the degradation, you have the removal, which is what mass incarceration does, right? It removes people. And it's actually for the better at least. New York Times has been doing stuff about the disappearing black male and them disappearing mostly because of mass incarceration. We don't talk about how in that period of 75 to 90, but we could extend it to 95, 2000, how addiction has ravaged our communities. So we have this large number of people we're losing. We have, due to the 1965 Immigration Act, right, we have more black people from all over the diaspora showing up. And there's a mismatch of understanding how some of the history is leading to what people are seeing. And now we don't have those connectors, as I call them, to build that trust, that unity, and to build. We don't have that. We lost that. And that just disabled us. And what it did is have a lot of people say, I'm for self. You know what I mean? It had a lot of distrust. And we still are at a point where we can't build, unity. You would think the last Mohicans in Brooklyn would be like, yo, we got to band together no matter whatever. But we're still not seeing it quite where we should or quite at the level I think that we need to. And our community's got to do better, for lack of a better term, building.
They really do. Do you think that it's more so that they are scared or they just feel that change is never really going to happen? So let me just keep up with the Joneses in a sense of word.
Oh, the latter is definitely, this thing can't do nothing about this, right? What you gonna, we got Barack Obama, but he couldn't undo what George Bush or Clinton, right? He can't undo what they did, right? Like he's one man, he's one time, he's one person. If Barack can't change people's kind of perception about how we can alter, restructure, revolutionize this society, then, we're hard pressed. And maybe the whole point is that we shouldn't be looking to him in that way, right? Because, if there's a picture of Lyndon B. Johnson and Martin Luther King, Barack Obama is not Martin Luther King. He's Lyndon B. Johnson. He's LBJ. He's the president. Yes. Where is the kind of movement from whether it's the metaphor of Martin or the, SNCC or that? Where is it? And we see it rising up. Dream Defenders do great stuff, right? Black Lives Matter in all its iterations, young millennials, right? Million Hoodies Up. I mean, we out there. We getting it, right? But it takes time and it takes scale and it takes persistence. I'm more hopeful on the persistence part. I'm more skeptical on the scale part. But we got to scale up. There is no choices. So we press on.
Definitely true. And you just talked about Black Lives Matter and, hoodies up and everything like that. And me and you have spoken a lot about the controversial social activism thing. So I want to know your perspective on how positively and or negatively do you think social media has affected social activism or activism as a whole?
The negative of the social media aspect is that it can be very passive, right? And we have an altered sense of how impact is created, right? There's nothing more personal and more impactful than the physical. Some of you who grew up in poverty will know this, right? If you call SNAP office or as we know, or EBT or food stamps office, if you call social services, you're probably not going to get anybody. You're going to be waiting forever. You show up, it's different. It's completely different when you show up. You still maybe got to wait, but you could have a different impact. People will tell you whatever on the phone, right? When you show up and you advocate and you know what you're talking about, very different kind of interaction. Social media changes our perception of that for the negative, I think, that we can just, type away. The good thing about social media is in the tradition, very importantly, of moving us off the center, right? To use a sports analogy, if you are a basketball player and you favor your right hand, the defense moves to the right, right? So if you start in the center in politics, the opposition is going to move you in the direction that you want to go, and you're fighting just to get back to the middle. Social media, particularly in the Black Lives Matter kind of sense, is pushing this conversation, not from the center, but all the way to the left, right? And being very vocal. And that's key, right? That's key. Could it have more impact if as many people that makes a hashtag viral or trending was showing up or on strike or on boycott, no, right? I don't think it matches that impact, because that'll be something. I mean, we saw it with Black Friday this year when people say, you know what, we're not going to shop, right? And you see, corporations like, oh, we got 10%, 20% dip. Well, we better watch out. And then there's silence around that. Ain't nobody doing that now, right? So it is important to push as much as possible off the center the people in elected office, in political, in social status, and in economic power. This moves them off the center. They can't avoid it, right? News got to cover it for whatever they cover. They cover trivial things and important things. And so our activism there, the new social movements, is key. Move these people off center as much as possible. The downside is people don't realize what it is to show up, to be embodiment, not to get spiritual or whatever, but people spiritual, whether it's institutional church or just like beliefs and spirituality, no, bodies matter, right? And showing up matters, and embodiment matters. So you need to show up and be there. And we need some of that. We're losing that with social media, but we're gaining so much. Move at 2 feet.
True. I definitely agree with that. And I guess I always try to tell people ways to not only talk about it, but be about it, but even moving more than just hashtagging and even moving beyond protesting, because in my opinion, protesting is just a start. It's a way to keep the media coverage going on what's actually going on, but you have to do so many more steps than that. So I want to know what you think those other steps could possibly be, or again, how can you just more so be about it than just talk about it?
Go on strike, boycott, don't settle for less. And and the last one maybe is more of a metaphor. But look, disruption is key, right? Because, and this is something that's not radicalized unless you think Dr. King's nonviolent, passive-aggressive direct action was, radical. And in some ways, yes, but in many other ways, no, right? But disruption was the key, right? If business as usual, then Black lives don't matter. They just get shot dead. Or they just get the food that's expired, or they just get the books that are left over, or they're just at the whim and the dependency of a philanthropy that gives maybe sometimes, and a middle class who visits maybe once in a while, and or who creates an industry to make them money. That's what happens if business is as usual. If you're an interrupter, very different, right? You see brothers on the corner, maybe you're worried about what they're doing, show some love, right? If you don't feel like you can do it safely by yourself, get a group of people and show some love. Right? We got these Black churches, right? Get on our feet and interrupt, right? Interrupt where you maybe see this violence going on. Interrupt where maybe you see, man, I've been seeing the people in the community kind of doing weird things around sexuality and their bodies and demonstration. Let me not preach. Let me just talk about, look, how can we change this up and think about the way that we look? How can I promote freedom and independence, right? Where's our space for music? Where's our space for art? Interrupt business as usual. That's a community sense. Interrupt business as usual. Boycott. Don't buy this stuff. Yeah. Go on strike, right? Your job is treating y'all like a plantation. Go on strike. That's a conversation about unions, how we're going to survive if I'm not working and getting a check. But we can't continue to settle for less. You settle for less, you settle for not enough. The system just keeps going. And if you're not in a position to do it because you're taking care of 4 or 5 kids, them kids need to know that this got to stop at some point. And while we don't have to, we won't. Right? Because they can afford to do it in a way that maybe the mom and dad or the auntie or uncle or the grandma that got them kids that can't. You can't. Don't settle for less. Demand for something more. Interrupt this system as usual. And so that's why, the sisters that interrupted Bernie Sanders, good. Bernie Sanders just can't keep talking as usual. He needs to be interrupted, right? And to be interrupted so he can reconsider and rethink. Just like I want them to interrupt Hillary Clinton next. And just like they need to interrupt Trump needs a permanent interruption. And that's just like publicized kind of way. Interrupt, when they follow you around in a store, right? Interrupt when somebody, mistreats you because of how you look. Interrupt that. So interruption is the key, right? In all the small ways and large ways that you can. But interrupt business as usual. Interrupt the chains. Interrupt the kind of lack of pathways to wealth that we have instead of just low-paying jobs. Like, interrupt business as usual and functioning as usual. Otherwise, if you don't interrupt it, same things happen. You're stopped and frisked. You're killed with sanction, with impunity, and then sanctioned by the state. You get the leftover textbooks. You get the test where you just filling in bubbles, not explaining things. You get that. We don't want that. we don't need that, how are we going to force the system to do something until we get a new system, which is a different conversation, right? In the meantime, interrupt it in all ways because Black Lives Matter.
Nice. And even when it comes to the social activism part, even economically, I always say that we need to support each other more. We need to support Black-owned businesses. We need to start our own businesses and be entrepreneurs. So I want to ask you, do you think that we could ever get to the point of having a Black Wall Street again?
Yes, we can. The challenge is that models of Black success historically have been destroyed, not by ourselves. Black Wall Street is destroyed by white supremacy, right? HBCUs are being destroyed, right, by philanthropy that rather give to institutions that don't privilege or don't premise taking us in first and our development, but others, right? So there's an issue with like the sustainability because the history is that whenever we create a model of success or create something that works, we're always under the threat of being destroyed, right? We're always under the threat of having it deconstructed. And so how do we learn from those lessons? This is a bigger thing, right? This is like decolonization in the Caribbean, right? How didn't we get to follow up and build that solidarity? This is now the Africa question, right? What's happening in South Africa, in Nigeria, in Kenya, right? I'm talking about the most kind of stable economies there, right? Post-colonial, who's benefiting, right? And our models of success, why are they compromised and why are they going to the elite? This is a larger question, right? The models of success that we have always are destroyed. How do we learn from the way it was done before? And how do we sharpen up to think about not letting it happen moving forward? I'm hopeful that we will, but it deeply troubles me that in this country, people don't realize the pressure that will be placed upon, right? The same kind of group that organized around birtherism and say, oh, Barack Obama's not a citizen, not to use him, right? But the same kind of energy they have for that, the same energy they have around Donald Trump and Mexicans are doing whatever, that energy will always be channeled to trample our models of success. But are we aware of that or just laughing at, oh, ha, 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 look at what they're saying and doing to him? No, this is a learning kind of thing, and we need to be aware. We know about COINTELPRO. We know about that kind of destruction. How are we going to learn and do better? And we know that they're still doing it. You saw this thing about Baltimore. FBI got the profiles and watching them. How we going? There's something not we can't do, right? You know, like we're going to stop using cell phone, I guess, perhaps. But, you know, we got to learn. And so I want us to have it. I think we can have it. I know we got the brain power and capital in human, cultural, social things, but just be wary of the forces of destruction. That I'm a little worried that we still don't know better.
I feel you on that. And I know that you share all of this just wealth of knowledge with the young men in your program. So I wanted to just give me a personal example of one of the impacts you've seen that your program has had on any one of these young men or on like a group as a whole. Like what changes have you seen?
So I think about my students here at BMCC, right? That is probably a more acute example, right? And I see two sisters, right? One Dominican immigrant has been here probably 20 years, so she's been here a while. One a Jamaican immigrant, she's been here 3 years, right? And to see what happens when one, they get knowledge of self, right? They start connecting, man, you know how race is seen in DR, and then how race perpetuates itself here, how it turns into a racism that denies humanity, denies political participation, and then socially keeps you down and becomes the explanation for economically why you're marginalized. To see the Jamaican sister say, man, you know, that colorism matters, right? Like, you know, the kind of thing about not just hair, but literally color, right? And you look at like positions of status and elitism and how, you know, man, that exclusion, that hierarchy of color, it starts to map over there. And then what am I going to do about those things? And now to see them going on to get PhDs in sociology, to try to want to go to Harvard Law School, and to know that and professionally, we're going to have more representation and more representation from this economic class of folks. This is low-income folks making that leap. But also to know that not only are they going to be doing that, but that they have consciousness. They have knowledge of self. They're going to, in their service, in their actions, in their writing, and in their thinking, destroy those things around colorism, around racism, around, excluding people. That, for me, that keeps me going. It's hard, right? But that definitely keeps me going. And to see, particularly with the brothers, two brothers who come back to school after in younger age, college going age, messing up and not seeing how school is important, right? Saying, you know what, I got this job in sales. I'm working a ton of hours, but I'm going to use what I know about hip hop, and I'm going to use like my skill set around reading and education to make me better, so that way I could continue on and after I graduate, build economic capital in our community. To see a brother who back in school who's a poet and say, yeah, I'm in school to be an x-ray technician, right? But my mastery in communications, right? Because I'm a poet and I know language. That's going to be how I build with the brothers and sisters in the corner while I got this job to just take care of myself and my family. To see that they're thinking, as the metaphor I used before, with them 2 feet, I know I got to stabilize. And I know I made mistakes in my younger life, but it's not over. And I'm going to think in a different way about my skill set, my ability in sales to translate into how I can read economic power, my ability in poetry to think about my mastery of language and communication with the people that I know, and that I can go out and reach them by touch and by physical, not just by words. That does it. Those 4 people, I don't want to say their names, put them out there. But if I send them the clip, they're going to know who they are, right? That's the stuff that I believe in, and that speaks to me, and I hope speaks to others. So
Nice. That's beautiful. Now, with you, who are some of your favorite people in Black history?
history.
Yeah.
I mean, Malcolm, right? Off the top. Malcolm, Angela, and Harriet Tubman. Those are like the triumphant, right? Like those 3. Harriet Tubman, inexplicably remarkable. Right? Talking about leadership and selflessness. Inexplicably remarkable, right? We got to do the math on her. Malcolm, intellect, right? Superior, top notch. It shows you how being smart can take you far, right? And Angela Davis, I just love her thinking, right? Angela Davis thinking is sharp, like a sword, like the sharpest sword, right? And I just, the nerd in me always has an appreciation for her. And interestingly, kind of some of the comics, right? Like I like Chappelle and I like Chris Rock, because I think they tell truth, right? And I really like how Rosie Perez be on The View and just like kind of kicking it these days. It got away, especially with, the other one up there talking crazy sometimes.
Since I'm calling you Black History in the Making, what does that mean to you?
Black history in the making. Living every day with purpose, living every day for your people, and making sure that you keep that physical presence with them, right? History is the accumulation of things, right? We don't lose it. We don't cut it. We don't subtract it. It accumulates. So the acts that you do, the presence that you have, the consciousness that you build, you're always accumulating. There's a lot of forces that want to repress, right, and erase the memory, the history, what we know, what we've done, what we're doing, right? So history in the making is always remember, this is accumulation, because then we protect things. We don't want to lose it quickly. We don't want to give it up too fast. We're not going to let people misdirect us. And so Black history in the making is that memory, that persistence, that accumulation, and that physical presence in acts and deeds and in thoughts. That's what we have to do. You could be a teacher, social worker, therapist, counselor. You could be a sanitation worker that says, you know what? My 4 little cousins, I'm going to make sure I talk to them, play ball with them. We're going to get a burger. Like, I'm going to be a positive influence in their life. Yeah. That's all it takes. Encouraging Facebook message. Hey, man, I love you. Hey, sis, I love you. Hey, like, that's the accumulation. You just got to do it. You start looking at your life and decide of what you think versus what you do. When one starts to get bigger than the other, balance it out. And that's how we make it, right? By doing.
Definitely. And what's the legacy that you want to leave behind with all of the stuff you're doing? I mean, with your nonprofit, with you being a professor, with you just aiming so high to be one of those people who be about it and not just talk about it. What legacy do you want to leave?
Man, heavy questions for a young person, right? One is kind of, I'm not whatever, but one thing is, I just want to do God's work. Whatever you call God, spirits, ancestors, whatever, but I just want to do God's work, meaning that, I just feel like I was come here to do positivity and to spread light. And I want to continue that. The other thing is I just want my children. I got one now, but the rest of them that might be coming, I just want them to say my father stood for something, and he did things because he stood for it. He just didn't say it, but he stood the line, and that I know he did everything he could to make this world better. I just want them to be able to be proud of their daddy and be like, he did something, right? Because so many people don't, for whatever the reasons. And it's important to do things, right? And I just want them to be proud of me because that's a life of meaning, right? Is that others can be proud of what you did, no matter if they disagreed or agreed with your views and your decisions. So that's what I want to do. I just want to do God's work, and I just want my children to be proud of me when I'm gone.
I love that. And in closing, I just want to ask you, why is Black beautiful in your own words?
Black is beautiful because of, listen. Black is beautiful because of the dignity and the hue that it gives to a kind of human experience that at many times can be dull, right, and narrow, right? The evil forces try to make it dull and narrow and then to say that's not beautiful. Blackness gives hue. It gives life. It takes the worst and it turns it into brilliance, right? It's learning by doing, right? It's innovation. It's the dudes that say, you know what? If you put the earphones in each in the other turntables, you can hear what's going on, and then you can scratch. And then if you scratch, then we could just play the hottest parts of the song. It's learning by doing, and it's innovation. Black is beautiful because it is beautiful to see people reverse engineer, people making basketball hoops out of crates and then learning how to play well, people taking the worst, taking the narrow and the dark and turning it into the beautiful and giving it color, right? It is so uplifting to think about it in that kind of way. And the history of Black folks is consistently that we're making this thing that is narrow, that is unattractive, making it beautiful by innovating it, enhancing it, right? Turning something into nothing and thinking outside the box. And I love it. We try to teach the history from that perspective as much as we can. To me, that's what it is. Keep innovating, right?
Thank you so much for sitting with me, Michael Partis, just a great man, philanthropist, professor. Make sure you guys check out his movement, youngmovement.com. And also, it's the Bronx Brotherhood Project also. Make sure you subscribe. And thank you again for tuning in to So Reflectionz TV. Peace, kings and queens.